Jesus calls us to the way of reconciliation, which begins with empathy, love, and compassion. Scripture reminds us that if one person hurts, every other person is involved in the hurt and in the healing. And so with reconciliation, we remove the walls of silence that separate us, and in their place, we begin authentic conversations that lead to action and build a bridge.
One of my favorite movies is called The Blind Side. It's the story of a football player, Michael Orr. Michael played on the offensive line, and his position is designed to protect the quarterback's blind side. Most quarterbacks are right-handed, and their vision is focused towards the right side of the field. And often they can't see what's coming up on the left. So they call it their blind side. Well, I'm not a football player, but I have a blind side. This past summer, my blind side was revealed to me in a big way. My blind side was in how I understood racial injustice. Words cannot express what I felt as I watched the video of George Floyd's breath being slowly pressed out of him to his death. My eyes were opened to a new way of seeing racism. Racism in my town became even clearer as Pastor Jeff interviewed several people from our congregation that have been victims of racial injustice over and over again. Well, listening to their stories of injustice, well, that just made me sick to my stomach. I thought race relations were good. I always said, well, I don't see color when I see a person. I now realize that isn't helpful. Of course I see color when I see someone. We all do. I don't dislike someone because of the color of their skin. But now I understand that isn't enough. That isn't enough for those who experience racism. So we are called to do justice and advocate for those who live with injustice. Well, we are in this worship series titled Be a Bridge, and we believe being called by Jesus to build bridges where injustice has left a deep chasm, dividing us from one another, is what we're called to be about. And we need to open our eyes, our hearts, our souls to those who have lived and continue to live with racial injustice. Personally, I had a blind side when it came to racial injustice. I needed to see more clearly the injustice that was right in front of me. Well, the Gospel of Mark tells a significant story about seeing more clearly. So today we are going to read from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. When they arrived at Bethesda, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then, spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Can you see anything now?" Well, the man looked around, and he said, "Yes, I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored. He could see everything clearly. Well, this gospel story is unique because the healing doesn't happen all at once. It takes time. The man cannot see clearly at first. Although the man's vision is ultimately restored, Jesus provides a second healing to bring sight to the blind man. And that is good news, because it takes many of us time to see that racism right in front of us is there, but we can't always see it clearly. Many of us can look at the same thing, but have completely different ways of seeing it. It often takes time to see the whole picture. For instance, take a look at this picture. What did you see? Did you see a frog? Well, if you saw a frog, you're right. Oh, did you see a horse? Well, if you saw a horse, you're right. This is a picture of both a frog and a horse. When most people look at this picture, they see either the frog or the horse. But if you take time to really look, to really see, you are able to see both images. You see, often it takes time to see the whole picture. In this picture, I saw the horse, and it took time for me to see the frog. Well, it can be that way with seeing racism as well. It takes time to notice that there's something more than we have seen, something deeper happening. That racism can be so deeply embedded in the status quo that we've even stopped seeing it, stopped looking for it. Well, I can relate to the blind man in this gospel story as I walk a bridge towards seeing racial injustice. I realize I don't always see clearly what has been right in front of me. I haven't seen racism clearly, and it has taken me some time to have my eyes opened. And it continues to be an eye-opening process. The more I look with new awareness, the more I see how people have been experiencing injustice due to the color of their skin. In the gospel, the blind man was taken outside of the village to meet with Jesus, to be with Jesus. He had to walk on the outskirts of town, to walk away from everything that was familiar to him, to a place where he was alone with Jesus. Like the man in the gospel, I've had to walk away from what I thought I knew and lean on Jesus for a new way of seeing. I've had to let go of what has been my familiar way of seeing racism and depend on Jesus for opening up my own heart to see the injustice more clearly. Do you know Jesus has called every one of us to stand up for those who are oppressed by injustice? And as we look at the life and ministry of Jesus, we see him engaged in bringing justice and mercy to those who are oppressed. He loves the outcast, the despised, and the rejected. And when we follow Jesus, we live as he has called us to live, bringing about justice and mercy. But doing that, living that way, well, it can be challenging. Think of how many relationships are fractured, broken, and strained. There is a division that is surrounded by bitterness, negativity, and indifference. So what can building a bridge look like among the messiness we experience? Well, it begins by understanding and recognizing that we may not see clearly what's right in front of us. It means asking Jesus to open our hearts and our eyes to see what he sees, to be able to walk away from our own comfort zones into a place with Jesus where we haven't been, so that we can see more clearly. We live in a world where people are treated with injustice, often just because of the color of their skin. It occurs on a daily basis. Sometimes it's hard to see, and sometimes it's not. God has always been about justice. In Micah 6:8, he says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." In Isaiah chapter 1, it says, "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed." And Psalm 106 says, "Blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right." The scriptures are clear. Jesus is clear. We are called to stand up for justice. So where do we begin? Well, no matter where you are in this process, it's important to accept just where you are. Then, one place to start is to take a look at where you are towards building a bridge of reconciliation. We can all start by asking ourselves if we even want to see things differently. Well, the blind man did, and Jesus opened his eyes. So perhaps for some of us, The first step is a change of heart, to want to see. Well, I'd like to leave you with an impactful spoken word video that speaks to the idea of seeing. While you're watching this, ask yourself, which people in my life am I facing away from? How might I reach out and turn around to hear and see these people more clearly? Am I open to God moving in my heart to help me truly see others? And then I encourage you to ask God, out loud or silently to yourself, to give you the courage to see, and to give our congregation the courage to be the hands and feet of Jesus as we build a bridge of reconciliation.
For back to back, will my brokenness find you? Slide through the air and weigh you down too? If we stand eye to eye, will the truth ring true? Will you see me for me and I see you for you? 'Cause the pain in this world presses down like a cloak, a weight that I crumble under that threatens to choke out the fractures of life that give me hope until all I am is a set of broken bones. And these days, darkness covers my eyes until there seems to be nothing but absence of light, and it hangs in the air, this truth we don't say, that the world is hurting and we're all to blame. All to blame, all the same, all subject to hatred and judgment and rage. And I see it so clearly outside of me. Things I can point to, things I can grieve. And it looks like hunger and feels like depression, and it sounds like bombs and hurts like oppression, aggression, regression, lack of freedom for self-expression. And the shadows in me try to box it up clean, organize and label the broken things I see, until they're so normalized they don't mean a thing, and I don't realize the brokenness in me. I don't realize it until I feel you breathe. So I'll start with confession and hope that you see me for me in our same basic need. I have broken bones, broken words, and broken hopes. I don't say what I mean, I pray the wrong thing. I have a broken heart and broken dreams on repeat. And I have more blind spots than I'm even aware, and a failure to see love when it's standing right there. I have hurt others and hurt myself more because for some reason I thought all was fair in love and war. And in that moment of confession, my world took a dive. Because we're not back to back, we're standing eye to eye. And quietly you say, I carry it too. Brokenness, it's what we humans do. But I'll love you for you, because I know the truth. You're just like me. Broken, but you. So here we stand on holy ground. 'Cause you gave me love I would have never found without you and confession and forgiveness and grace, and I am transformed in sacred ordinary space. For my brokenness found you, and yours found me right back. And now I know we're united and there's no going back. Your forgiveness reminds me of who I'm meant to be. Eye to eye, I finally see.